everyone. Today we are going to discuss about the natural selection and adaptation. In order to understand the natural selection, first we need to understand about adaptation. Adaptation is the process of adjusting itself by change in a behavior, physiology or structure to become more suitable to an environment. It is a characteristic that increases the chance of a survival or reproduction of an organism that bear that characteristic. And the trait which make the species more fit for the environment, it is known as the adaptive trait. Adaptation occurs through the natural selection. Everything related to adaptation is already there in the DNA sequences, but it gets activated when the external stimuli is present. So accordingly, the adaptation occurs and it occurs through natural selection. Now, I would like to discuss some of the examples related to adaptation. Many plants in the arid environment have adaptation to reduce their water loss, as in these cacti, which lack leaves. The stem where photosynthesis takes place are thick, and they have made this situation in a way so that they can reduce their ratio of surface area to volume. In the first picture, we can see Echinocactus grusoni has become globular barrel cacti in order to adapt itself. The barrel shape is due to the decrease in the surface area by volume, which reduces the water loss. Similarly, in the figure B, we can see Opuntia bigelovi have hairs that reflect the light and it reduces the temperature of the plant body, and in this way it adapts itself in the arid environment. Here is one more example of adaptation. In this case, Florida and Texas are there and Asian trees have been planted and a bug is feeding on these species. So the native species on which the bug depended in Florida had a larger pod, but the introduced one had a smaller pod, and the introduced one increased its number. So the bug had to adjust itself according to the introduced one, and because it had a smaller size, the introduced one had a smaller size, so in order to feed on it, it has to reduce its beak size. Similarly, in Texas, the native pod has a smaller size and the introduced one had a larger pod size. And the introduced one increased its number, so the bug has to depend on the introduced pod. So it evolved itself into having a larger beak size. Here is another example of adaptation. It is the resistance toward the insecticide. The graph here depicts that the number of resistant pest species have increased over the year with regard to the insecticide, and also the total amount of insecticide which have been used over the years, the resistance towards them is increased. Here are two more examples of adaptation that have taken place over the years. The first graph shows that due to the overexploitation of the fishes, they have evolved by earlier sexual maturation at a smaller size in order to reduce the chance of their predation. And the second one shows that the trophy hunting for bighorn sheep has evolved into having a smaller horns so that their hunting can be reduced. So we can say that in all the above examples that I've shown you, they have adapted itself to make them fit for the environment so that their chance of survival and reproduction can increase. Please note that all the variations for the trait were already present in the environment, but according to the situation which was suitable for them, they have evolved itself, and this process is known as natural selection. So now let us discuss what is natural selection. Natural selection is any consistent difference in the fitness among different classes of biological entities. This means that for a characteristic, there is a variation among the group members, and out of them, one of the characteristic for the trait has been selected which was fit for the environment. So this is known as natural selection. All the examples that have been told for the adaptation have taken place because those characters were fit for the environment and nature have selected them. So adaptation took place through the process of natural selection over the generations. Now let us understand what do we mean by fitness. Fitness is the number of offspring an individual can leave in the next generation. For example, a species of a plant which lives for 1 year and it has 1,000 seeds in it, and out of which only one survives to reproduce, and it reproduces 3,000 seeds. So the fitness of that individual will be taken as 1 upon 1,000 into 3,000. That will give us the value which is 3. The components of the fitness are survival and reproduction. So fitness is sometimes known as the reproductive success, as the survival species can only be able to reproduce and they cannot reproduce when they are dead. Now let us understand how evolution by natural selection takes place. If the evolution by natural selection has to take place, so there must be a change in the population across the generation, and it should require that the observable differences can be seen and it has to be inherited in the next generation. Evolution by natural selection occurs only if there is a correlation between an individual's phenotype and its fitness. That means that phenotype should be responsible for increasing the fitness of that individual. The variation in the phenotype is correlated between the parents and their offspring. The variation in the phenotype, that is the difference in the phenotype which is increasing the fitness of an individual, should pass on from parents to their offspring so that in the next generation it increases the chance of the survival of the next generation as well. Now let us understand how natural selection takes place in nature through an example. In an asexually reproducing annual plant, that is, the plant that lives for 1 year, has two types of genotypes, genotype A and genotype B, which differs in a characteristic that affects their fitness. Example can be susceptibility versus resistance to a herbicide, and the average fitness for them is given as 3 and 4 respectively. So if the fitness value remains the same from one generation to another and it doesn't change, that means genotype B, which has the value 4 for the fitness, will increase its number and will become the major part of the population. And this is always seen in the form of frequency. So in the first graph, which is the A graph, it can be seen that over the generation, the genotype B has increased the number more in respect to genotype A. And also in the second graph, we can see that the frequency of genotype B is more than the genotype A. Therefore, we can say that the one which has higher fitness will be suited for the environment and eventually will increase its number. Now let us understand what do we mean by selection of and selection for a trait. This can be explained through a child's toy. This child's toy has holes in each section and the hole size has reduced from the upper section to the lower section, and in each section there are colorful balls. The upper section has the larger ball size and the lower section has the smaller ball size, and we have to select the smaller ball size. So there will be selection for the small size of the balls and the selection will be of the red balls. So we can imply it in a way that natural selection occurs for a feature and the people or the bearers which have that feature are automatically selected. But this feature can have the side effects which are the consequence of the selection. For example, selection of fish species for coloration. The function of this feature will be that it would lead to the less predation of the fish. So the chance of the extinction of this fish species would be less. But the cause of coloration is not to avoid the extinction, it is just the consequence of the selection. Now let us discuss the types of selection. There are three kinds of natural selection. The first one is directional selection, second is diversifying selection, and the third one is stabilizing selection. There is an example which is given for the fur color of the rats and frequency of the individual is given. Here is a graph which shows the phenotype of the fur color for the rats and the frequency of individuals bearing it. So in the original population, all the fur colors are present. In the directional selection, either of the extreme is always selected. In this graph, we can see the darkest color is being selected, so the evolved population has been towards the darkest color fur color. When both the extremes are selected, that type of selection is known as diversifying selection. Here we can see that the light color and the dark color both have been selected. And in the stabilizing selection, the mean color is always selected. So here we can see that the mean color of the fur color has been selected, and this type of selection is known as stabilizing selection. So that was it for today's video. I hope you enjoyed it, and if you have any queries regarding the topic, you can comment down your queries in the comment box or even telegram me in the Telegram channel. Thanks for watching.